Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, criminal court, and other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. And you can find the books on Amazon, and they are in audio as well. And Raised by These Wolves, Volume 3 will be coming out in January. I'm very happy to have a return guest on. I have Connie Reguli back on. She was last on the podcast season 2, episode 98, season 3, episodes 63, 70, 77, and 89, and season 5, episode 85. And today we're going to talk about a lot of things, especially the recent ruling in New Jersey regarding the shaken baby syndrome, and that was on November 20th, 2025. So I welcome you, Connie. So great to have you back on again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you always for your work. You work so hard. I listen to a lot of your podcasts.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
thank you for allowing me to be part of that voice.
Yes, thank you so much. We were talking earlier on the phone, and someone had said, "Well, gee, all these parents do is come on the podcast and I hate to say, but whine, but they're not. They're telling their story."
Well, and I listened to several of those stories, and, they're telling their stories, and so many people, I mean, I practiced law for 30 years, and so many people come into the court system and they get trapped in it. I mean, it's a trap.
Yeah,
And,
right,
they think it's going to be fair and unbiased, and none of that happens, right? And
right.
then they don't know what to do about it. They just don't know what to do about it. And so, I know a lot of people feel like they're just sometimes people talk in circles and get so frustrated. I can certainly appreciate and understand that. But when I listen to them, what I hear is, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And there was like no stopping it, right?
Hmm.
Like it began this cycle. And I hate to say this, but once you're in that court process, it's kind of like if the system gets away with something, that they're going to do it more,
Right.
right? So I know, they ultimately kicked me out of the practice of law with a fake crime because I
Hmm.
was too aggressive and I was too much on top of any of these little things that I saw going on, and I would stop them. I mean, I know I was several years ago, the judges had a really bad habit in this one particular court where we'd come in, we'd get all set up, we'd be ready to go. And the judges would say to the attorneys, "Why don't we go in the back and talk a minute?"
Uh,
And I was always like, what? And so I finally just said, I was like, Judge, I'm sure anything we have to talk about, we can say right here in front of my client. And
hmm.
those are the kinds of things that I did that kind of pissed off the system a little bit. But, those are the things that we have to start doing. We have to start being proactive. When you see things that don't feel right, people have got to write it down right then, and they've got to get a plan right then and how they're going to attack it and what they're going to do about it. So it's a trap, it's a system of entanglement. You get entangled in it, you feel helpless, you feel stupid. They want you to feel stupid. So one of my big goals now is I want to really educate people on how they just going into it, first of all, expect the worst,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Just like totally expect the worst, totally feel like you're going into the haunted house on Halloween, right? And the
Hmm.
next corner you turn, the guy's going to jump out from behind the wall with a bloody axe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and I chuckle about it, but it's so true. It's, that the paradigm that exists there is just so incredibly frightening. So I
Hmm.
want us now to be, I think we're at a very, very critical stage in advocacy and court reform. We're really at that stage of really educating the masses and helping them understand how to be proactive instead of reactive.
Right. And it's hard with this system. I know everyone wants to have it reformed, but how do you reform corruption? I think it should just be dismantled.
Yeah, so
I don't know.
I know and of course my real focus is on CPS, Child
Right.
Protective Services, and how they're stealing children. And of course they steal children in the family court system too. I mean, that's So, and I know there's a lot of people working on that, and I'm right there with them. The Title 4D, a lot of it is all this money, and perverted financial incentives, the good old boy system, like
Hmm.
who's friends with who goes to the bar association meetings, who sits together at lunch, who's emailing each other, who's going out after work for drinks and stuff. And that's one of the things that we've exposed here in Tennessee, and we sort of peeled those things back. And I mean, it was so bad in Tennessee that we finally this judge got caught, this general sessions judge got caught that a girl was in his courtroom and couldn't pay her probation fees. And so she had sex with him, right? And then he
Right.
writes off her probation fees. So, but
Yeah.
it was really hard to catch that and catch up with it. But the only way we can do it is be just 100% attentive to everything, right?
Right.
And it's really hard. I'll add this, that when you're in a litigation, when you're in a domestic case, you personally are, and they know this and they use this against you. You are personally
Hmm.
so exhausted and so emotionally drained. It's really hard to think of anything that's going on around you because you're in so much pain
Hmm.
and so much confusion yourself personally, right?
Right.
And so, we really want people, as hard as it is, as much as what's going on, you've got to sit down and you've got to have a game plan.
Mhm.
You've got to look at it like war. You've got to have notebooks. You've got to have strategies, and you have to watch everything that's going on, everything. If a judge winks at the other attorney or gives a thumbs up, and I've seen all these things happen. If a
Hmm.
judge snaps at your attorney, next break, you need to go out in the hallway and talk to your attorney
Hmm.
and do it respectfully. But you need to say, hey, look, that did not go without notice,
Yeah.
right? That this occurred. And so how does that play into what we're doing here? So we really want people to be more, I want people to be more educated, more prepared. With social media, we have the tools to do it.
Hmm.
We now have warriors who've been in this for a decade, you and Michael and several other people. And I think it's our duty and our job now to say, okay, we're going to keep telling these stories. So y'all need to listen to these stories because it's going to happen to you, right?
Oh,
And if not
yes.
you, your mother, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, cousin, hairdresser, somebody that
Yeah.
you know.
Right. Right. And with the CPS issue, the issue that I found very disturbing is that they are allowed to perjure themselves on the stand, and the judge goes with whatever they're saying. With,
Well, but the reason they're able to get away with that is
hmm.
because the parents and their counsel are not prepared, right? So they're not prepared because a lot of times this perjury is there's something that you can show that contradicts it. Now,
Hmm.
lies are hard to prove. I will tell you, and I'll tell people who, really trust their and want to depend upon their attorney to do a lot of things. Lies are hard to prove. So I know I had a client, gosh, 15 years ago, and it was a divorce case, and his wife lied a lot, and she made up things. And I told him, it's like every time she lies, it costs you $1,000 because I have to go find the evidence to prove that she's lying, right?
Right.
Like if she says she took the child to the doctor every other week, and I'm like, now I have to go get all the medical records to prove that she didn't do that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but that's the only way you can get through this. The only
Right.
way you can get through it is just keep peeling it back, write down all the lies, go figure them out, go be able to show that proof.
And that's even difficult when there's collusion between the judge and the opposing attorney.
Yes.
I, as you
Yeah.
know my story.
Yes, 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 yes. And and those are hard to find out too. They have this secret little society called the Inns of Court. And that's kind of their secret little bar
Mhm.
club that they don't let everybody in. They only let the people into that club who are going to swear to secrecy.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
So, so you've got to and don't be afraid to ask those questions. I mean, I've had people ask those questions during cases that I've had, like,
Mhm.
some people would say, like, I don't know if I want you, the judge doesn't like you. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you why they don't like me, and but you make the decision
Right.
because it's your case, and all I can do is work on your behalf. So on the other hand, some of them would hire me because, they're afraid of you, right? So, having that feeling and sort of ferreting out all those little nuances along the way is just critically important.
Mhm. It really is. And people don't understand when they get hauled in there with CPS. I mean, I was warned right off the bat from another nurse, and she said, whatever that caseworker says, the judge is going to go with it. That's just how it is.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's we're starting to expose that a little bit. And I've got a couple people I'm working with very close here in Tennessee to be able to expose those. But, again, it's being educated on knowing how to confront those issues.
Right. Definitely. Now, this recent ruling in New Jersey with the regarding the shaken baby syndrome on
Mhm.
November 20th, 2025, do you think CPS will use Munchausen by proxy with no evidence and how that could be impacted by the shaken baby ruling?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, for those who aren't aware of it, let me give everybody a little bit of
Mhm,
a narrative about what's happening here. So, shaken baby syndrome, SBS, also referred to as AHT, abusive head trauma, was something that's really been living among us for 50 years, a little
mhm,
more than 50 years now. And this whole thing with child abuse, which during the 50s and 60s, we had people writing books about battered child syndrome, and this whole shaken baby thing sort of arose during that time period.
mhm,
And then it started embedding itself. And for those who've had any CPS involvement, they know there's this thing called a child abuse pediatrician.
mhm,
Child abuse pediatricians were certified in 2009 by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and then they go around and they diagnose medically child abuse, which I have complained about many, many times in my life because I said child abuse is not a medical diagnosis. It is a legal term. It's a legal term, right?
mhm,
So, I've complained about that, but, we have this recurrence of a couple of themes with child abuse pediatricians, and one of them is shaken baby syndrome, and the other one is the fractured rib cases, which has its own little funky name. It's called multiple fractured ribs at various stages of healing, right?
yeah,
So
right.
you have those two things that are occurring in these very, very small babies. Now, in this particular case, I think the baby was 11 months old.
Mm,
There's a man who's on death row in Texas related to a 2-year-old who was allegedly shaken baby syndrome, Mr. Roberson. So that's going to be coming up some. I've been paying a lot of attention to what's going on there. But let's get back to New Jersey and what happened.
mhm,
So in New Jersey, this was a criminal case, and it is where an 11-month-old child had a seizure in the father's care. They take him to the doctor, take him to the hospital. They basically release the child. They go home. A couple weeks later, another seizure. Do the same thing. Take him in, have him looked at, take him home. The third time there's a seizure, and the third time the mother takes a video to show that what's happening with the seizure, that the baby goes limp and lifeless. So they take this, and then the father gets criminally charged with aggravated child abuse. And they get there, and there are certain diagnoses that they look at. I can't remember the exact diagnosis of this child, but with shaken baby syndrome, they look for three things. One of them are retinal hemorrhages, which
mhm,
of course your retina is in the back of your eye, and the hemorrhages would be behind your retina within your brain, right? Or within that cavity there. And then there are subdural hematomas, which are fluid. Some people think it's bruising, but it can be any type of fluid that accumulates between the brain and the skull. And then there is a encephalopathy or brain swelling,
mhm,
which can have various degrees. It can swell so much that there can cause seizures, or it can just be if you just have a serious fall and your head gets hurt and there's some trauma to your head, you'll have some brain swelling.
mhm,
So these are the three different symptoms that they were looking for. So they go and so they get ready to go to court, and the state has an expert witness who's going to come in and say the only way these symptoms could occur is shaken baby.
Mm.
Okay. Now, I have questioned shaken baby syndrome just from a logical standpoint for years because I'm thinking if you pick up a baby and you shake a baby hard enough to start bursting blood vessels in
Mm.
their head, you would think they would have some other type of injury, such as a neck injury, right?
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
would think their neck would be broken, or they would have, some hyperflexion, whiplash, strain in these in the tendons, right, that
Hmm.
hold up their head. And they're never really including that. And they're never really finding any type of fractures or broken bones in the neck itself.
Hmm.
So that has always been troubling to me. But in this case, the defendant had an incredibly brilliant attorney who challenged the state uh, the state's expert. Now, from a trial standpoint, and this is another learning point, a learning spot for those involved in the family court system,
Hmm.
is when there is an expert in a case, there is a process of expert disclosure. So, in federal rules and in most state rules, it's called a Rule 26 disclosure. And in that Rule 26 disclosure, you're supposed to disclose who the expert is, what their curricula vitae is, if they've testified as an expert before, and what are the facts that they're basing their opinion on, and what is the science or the authority that they're basing their
Hmm.
opinion on. So unfortunately, in so many cases, that the person who's in the defense position, such as a parent or a parent in a CPS case or a parent who's being accused in a family court case or a criminal case, so many times they're not going through that first process where they're properly getting in their hand this information about their expert. Now, especially in CPS cases, the attorneys do such a bad job of preparing in CPS cases, and they don't say, give me your expert disclosure, right? They just have to ask for it because once you get that, you can start tearing apart and you can start looking at what they relied upon, and you can use that for your own expert.
Hmm.
So, for instance, in a fractured rib case, I knew that the Vanderbilt doctor was going to be testifying against my client, who was a young mother who never hurt her child. And I asked for a disclosure of all of the authority that or scientific research that she would base her opinion on. And she only gave me like 5 articles, and I was able to pick those apart with my own expert.
Hmm.
So you ask for a disclosure. So once they got the disclosure, they got 3 other experts to testify. So they got a pediatric neurologist, a pediatric radiologist, and a biomechanic specialist. Okay, so biomechanics, of course, is the body and force.
Hmm.
Okay, so it can be, and even though doctors do study some biomechanic injuries, like they study car wrecks and things, maybe somebody gets thrown from a horse or any type of an injury that occurs because of force applied to the body, that's called biomechanics.
Hmm.
So that's totally different from disease, right? It's
Right.
totally different from some type of either genetic condition in the body or disease or autoimmune, right, or blood disease. So that there's a real distinction, first of all, as to whether or not it is a force that's being put on the body or is it something internal to the body. So the biomechanic engineers are the ones who look at if force happens to a body, if your arm gets pulled, if you're in wrestling or if you're a football player, if you get banged in the head, right? Those are all biomechanic studies.
Hmm.
So so the defense brought in these 3 people to challenge the science, okay, of the state's expert. Their whole point was to challenge the science. Now, I practiced law for 3 decades, way before the COVID-19 pandemic, where a few people finally during COVID started challenging science, right?
Hmm.
So, Oops, I lost the light here. So we want to, they wanted to challenge the science. Okay, um, so they brought these three people in and they put them on the stand and they go through this whole entire history of Shaken Baby. So they go through like what is when did it start? What kind of studies did they do? Now, some of the important things in Shaken Baby that you find out is you can't replicate it. You can't do a laboratory research project where you take a baby and shake it, right? You can't do that. It's unethical and it could
Right.
cause real damage. But what they did do was they took monkeys,
Mhm.
unfortunately,
I
and
know.
they anesthetized monkeys, and then put monkeys in acceleration program or projects,
Yeah.
et cetera, to see what type of whiplash occurred to them or if any of these other injuries occurred. So you can't really do a replicating research project. So
Mhm.
all they could do was take a look at all of the cases that have been in the past with Shaken Baby and then try to pick them apart. So they had this whole series, what they called confession studies, where
Mhm.
somebody confessed to shaking their baby. And then they would look at all of the claims about the injuries that the babies had. Now, rarely did they get all three triad of symptoms, even though they had admitted to shaking babies.
Mm.
So they looked at the confession studies. There's another set of studies called the witness studies, where a witness says, I saw him shake the baby, right?
Mhm.
Now, the problem with witness studies, of course, is your witness may be biased, right?
Mhm.
If your witness is somebody who wants to put somebody in jail, they're going to describe it much more seriously.
Mhm.
So those were the only types of studies they had. And so these three witnesses came in and basically beat up the science. They came in and they said, this is not good science. This is a challenged theory. You can't biomechanically reproduce it, and it's just inconsistent with what medical data should show. So they won. They won that. They won that at the district level, and then it was appealed, and then ultimately gets all the way up to the New Jersey Supreme Court. And I watched that entire oral argument, and there were some very good questions asked about the science behind Shaken Baby. And so they won. And this New Jersey opinion came out. It's 157 pages, very, very long, very, very detailed. And is a dissenting opinion. And for those who are not sure what that is, a dissenting opinion is from the person, one or two people who don't agree, right?
Mhm.
And the people who don't agree were really kind of saying, look, this is a baby with injuries, and we need to take the more protective stance, is kind of the position that they took.
Mhm.
Great. So here we are, and we have this out of New Jersey. They did an excellent job. Excellent job. Now, people say, this is the New Jersey case. How does it help me in Michigan or Arizona or Oklahoma or Washington, right?
Right, right.
As an attorney, I will tell you that it helps you in several ways.
Mhm.
One of them is that this case, if you pull this opinion and read it and look at it, it has a really good history of the research. It's very, very detailed, long history of the research. So it would give you the information you need to make your own challenge, right?
Mhm.
So it's very good from that standpoint. So I'm very excited about it. I've seen a few cases come up over the past 4 or 5 years. I haven't talked about them a lot. I've kind of
Mhm.
put them all in my little bank of information, but I think it's time that I want people to understand. I want people to be better educated, and people are facing these kinds of challenges daily. I do belong to a listserv of attorneys called the SBS,
Mhm.
and we share this information. We pass it around. We are, looking for ways to better challenge it. At some point, we need to come at loggerheads to the American Academy of Pediatrics, who is the one who is driving all of this.
So there are parents getting accused of Munchausen by proxy and without the evidence. So, how can that be
Yes.
impacted with this new recent ruling?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Munchausen's, which I think they now call it, although a lot of people still call it Munchausen's, they now call it factitious disorder, I think is the new
Oh,
language for it, which
okay.
is factitious basically is fiction, right? Like somebody's creating this fiction and it's a disorder, a fiction. And so when people are challenged with that, and I've seen good cases and I've seen bad cases in this, documenting everything is so important.
Hmm.
And if anybody watched the Maya Kowalski case,
Oh, yes.
the one thing about, which is a whole nother discussion because of what the court has done to them at this point, but in the Maya Kowalski case, and I watched a lot of it, is the mother did some videos. And she did a video of her daughter at physical therapy months before she was ever in the hospital, and
Hmm.
how the physical therapist was trying to work with her and she could not walk, right? They had video. She was unable to walk because of the pain in her limbs. So you've got to document it. You have to document it.
Hmm.
And, and also if it's something unusual with your child, you've got to accept that the fact that sometimes doctors are stumped, right? They're stumped because they don't know what it is and they don't know what to do about it. And so it becomes easier to blame a parent for creating something that's fiction
Hmm.
than to try to reach a remedy.
Yeah, sad but true.
So
Mm.
if somebody is faced with that and they have an expert, again, if they're on notice that some expert's going to come and testify against them on that, they need to get the expert disclosure, right? They need to find out who this person is, what their CV is, what their opinion's going to be, what they're going to base it on,
Mhm.
and the authority that they're using for that reasoning. They've got to do that. They have got to do it. You've got to do your preliminary discovery work before you can even challenge these things.
Right. And I know a lot of parents, they'll sit back and let the attorney worry about it, but they have to help the attorney too.
They do have to help the attorney. And I've had a couple different fractured rib cases. The very first time I had a fractured rib case as an attorney, I was totally stumped. I mean, you've got to remember your attorney is just an attorney.
Mhm.
They're not a doctor, they're not a scientist, they are just attorneys. And so, in the second case I had, the mother, who was a very young mother, she was so proactive. And she was the one who got on the internet and searched and searched and searched. And this is 10 years ago, but she
Mhm.
searched and searched until she found, three or four possible experts. And then once she had identified them, I, of course, had to get on the phone with them. I had to send them the medical records. I had hours of conversations with these doctors explaining to me the process so that I could just ask them intelligent questions. Because that's the other thing. Even if you do find an expert, even if you do put your own expert up there, you've got to ask them intelligent questions. You cannot just say, what is your name? Do you have an opinion in this case? What is it?
Mhm.
Okay. So, you've got to be prepared to ask intelligent questions. Now, I will say that I say that, and then I'm going to say I have had a couple of excellent experts in the past who basically you can kind of give them the ready, set, go cue,
Mhm.
and, they are able to testify if you've spent enough time in preparation with them.
Mhm.
But, the parents and the families that are involved, as soon as they sense, and it can be Munchausen's, it can be parental alienation, it could be even, there's sort of this undefined expert testimony that comes in a lot of custody cases about attachment, right? Like
Mhm.
the child is more attached to one parent than the other
Mhm.
parent, right? I mean, those are things that you have to really, really isolate about how they're coming up with those opinions. Is it an artificial environment? Is there any other stress points within that situation that could have affected the child, et cetera?
Mhm.
So, these are, you've got to do your homework, you've got to do your preliminary work. And if you do it, you really knock it off as being, you knock it out of the park as far as being part of something that is worth considering. But you've got to plow forward and do it.
It's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, and it just what people go through, even what the attorney goes through, because I remember a video of you and I just thought you were fantastic because you were with the parents. They had to hand over their baby at was it at 1:30 in the morning? And
I
you
was
were
about
right there.
10:30 at night.
It
Yeah,
was
10:30, 11.
10:30 at night. Oh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm thinking, gee, where was my attorney at, at such a time?
I was pretty mad. By that stage, that was in 2000, I was pretty upset. I was
Yeah.
at the edge. I mean, I'm a very I'm a nonviolent person, but
Mhm.
by that time in my career, I was pretty full of it and pretty much done with them. And remember, in 2019, I was arrested and put in jail. And so
Mhm.
2020 came and my client was texting me and he was at this parking lot and he's like CPS going to take the baby. And I mean, I was not too far away, but I was 20, 30 minutes away. And I was just like, okay, keep me posted. I didn't think I could get there. And they kept holding them there. They kept holding them. And like every 10, 15 minutes, I'd say, what's going on? He goes, oh, we're still here. The cops are still here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I drove up there. It was in a Wendy's parking lot
Mm.
and there were 4 or 5 cop cars there. I started videotaping and live streaming. And I probably, had I not just recently gone through that arrest, I probably would have been more aggressive. But yeah, it was. I tried to get DCS to answer questions. They wouldn't answer questions. They put this, 3-week-old infant in a toddler car seat, and the
Oh,
cops did nothing about it. The baby's crying. She's got the blanket all tucked behind him, and mama's sitting on the curb crying. Yeah, it
oh,
was terrible. It was terrible.
yeah.
And that happens all the time. It happens all the time. And people don't even know what to do about it. I mean,
Mhm.
they're told to hold their, and now they passed a law basically, if you don't turn your child over, if you don't hand your child over when it's an ex parte order and somebody has lied to get an ex parte order, it doesn't even matter. If you refuse to turn your child over, you're going to jail on a felony.
Mm.
So there is no recourse, and that's why we have to fight this at the front end. These ex parte orders have got to go. They've just got to
Right.
go.
I think CPS has got to go.
Yeah.
What purpose do they serve? The
They're a money machine.
Well, exactly that too. That too. I mean, the generation of Title IV B and E, they're just raking it in. And
Yeah.
I think I sent you like I think it was 2 articles on how New Jersey's, wanting to hire more caseworkers.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, gee, we got enough problems and you want to hire more of those?
Well, one of the things about these caseworkers is nobody knows what these caseworkers are doing. Okay. I mean, they're doing things, they're sitting in court a lot, right? Sitting
Hmm.
around in court wasting time. Like, that is not casework. That's not social work. They are sometimes required to do weird stuff. I'll give you a couple examples.
Mm.
A case here in Tennessee, the caseworker had to go pick up the child after school and take it to the foster parent's house. Like, that is not that, and that was a foster parent who should have been providing care for the child and transportation. But they use the caseworker to do things like this that is not really casework. So nobody's done like a time study of how do they spend their time. This is something that's really frustrating to me and
Mhm.
should be really frustrating to anybody who's in the real world and has to keep track of their time and what they're doing all day and how they're spending their time. So when they say they need more caseworkers, I'm like, no, you need more efficiency, right? You just
Right.
need to do your job better and your work, it better. So into this, I do want to take a look at what happened in New Jersey and then take a look at something else in Florida. So in Florida, there is a case that was passed to me and it's still a case that's under seal, so I can't tell the exact
Mm.
parties or anything in the case, but it was a termination of parental rights, and the issue was fractured ribs, right? And so in that fractured ribs case, they sort of tried during the trial, but the attorneys did not do that good of a job. And after the trial was over, they then went and found experts. Okay, so this is really a story about too little, too late.
Mm.
Because if you don't do it during your case, when your case is in court, they came back after the case with really good experts who had reviewed the whole case and found out and really had a different opinion about what had happened, and the judge would not let it in. And
Oh.
or wouldn't turn the case over. And the judge, the opinions keep saying, well, you could have done this at the first hearing. You could have done this already. So that's another reason why people just at the very get-go, at the very beginning, as hard as it is, as
Hmm.
confused as you are, as heartbroken as you are, as hurt as you are, as emotionally distressed as you are, you have to do everything you can at the front end to build your battlefield, right?
Hmm. Right. And also, parents, I've talked to so many parents that they didn't get their name cleared or they didn't go through the CPS hearing. I don't know, like, no one's looking out for them when these things happen. I had to go through two CPS hearings. Well, it's OCY here in Pennsylvania, but I was cleared, thank God, of both of them. There's a time frame and parents are not aware of this.
No, no, you're right. They don't know the limitations. And I'll tell you, in Georgia, Alabama, I'm working with a state rep in Alabama, and we're working on a new law, especially related to the administrative findings of child abuse, because
Mhm.
the administrative findings of child abuse are a much lower burden of proof. They can do that with a preponderance of the evidence. And so they will have an administrative process and they'll have a court process, right? And a civil court process, and then sometimes a criminal court process. So you could be involved in three different things at the same time.
Oh,
And the lowest burden of proof is at the administrative level, which is only a preponderance of the evidence, which is just really 51% more than what the other side has, right? Which is I've always, it's a terrible burden of proof. Preponderance of the evidence is terrible. But then at the civil level, you're supposed to have a little bit higher burden of proof for clear and convincing. And of course, at the criminal level, it's supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt. So even though they may not be able to prosecute you or even terminate your parental rights, they can still use that administrative process to be able to adjudicate you administratively that you're a child abuser by a preponderance of the evidence. And if they are successful at that, they can put you on a registry. And they put you on a registry, which limits your employment, which limits your ability to go on a school trip, right? You even go to the schools, right? If you're on a child abuse registry, to coach your child's soccer team, right? And
hmm.
in Alabama, they had absolutely no way to appeal that.
Yeah.
So if there's an administrative finding, even though they don't terminate your parental rights, even though they send your children home, you can still be administratively declared a child abuser.
That is so scary.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, if you can't work, I tried to get a job at a fabric store and I was under indication. And, my friend was trying to get me in there and the manager said she's got to be totally clear of all this to even work in a fabric store.
Oh, no.
So you're punting with no money coming in.
Right.
And the person that made the false accusation is just waltzing around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And even though they say there are ramifications of making false reports, there's really not. There's really not. I know a couple years ago in Tennessee, we tried to get a new bill passed that would remove anonymous reporting and still allow it to be confidential. And in other words, you would have to give your name and contact information. You would be
Hmm.
required to. You could not make an anonymous report. And DCS actually came in and testified against it. And part of the issue is that there are people who make false reports, and we should be able to cut those false reports by identifying people and having some type of consequences for that.
Hmm.
And even though there is a statute that said it was like a Class C misdemeanor or something, it's
Hmm.
never prosecuted. And so DCS came in and they says, well, we can still prosecute if it's anonymous. And they're like, how? How are you going to do that? And he's like, well, we could check the phone records. And they're like, have you ever done that? And they're like, no. They get 130,000 calls a year. They're not going to go back and go through all their phone records, to find out an anonymous report on February the 13th,
Hmm.
sometime in the afternoon between noon and 8 p.m., right? Because
Hmm.
they don't even know where to start. They don't even have that much information sometimes.
Right.
So they came in and they fought against that. So we still have anonymous reporting. All the states have anonymous reporting. And it's very, very detrimental. It seems like a Sixth Amendment violation as far as
Mhm.
not being able to confront your accusers, but you don't have a Sixth Amendment right in civil cases. So, so people can make allegations against you and you never know who they are. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes those allegations are made by caseworkers, you
Mm.
know. Yeah, especially if there's an open case already. And I've seen this happen. Maybe there's 4 or 5 kids in the home and there's an allegation only on one child, or let's say there's 2 young children and the mother's pregnant, and they come in and they snatch up those 2 young children, and then the mother has her baby, and a CPS worker calls in a report that there's already an open case and the children have been removed, and then they go and they snatch the newborn baby.
It's just so heartless. It's just so heartless.
It's not only heartless, there are so many due process issues.
Right,
I mean, this is America. I mean, just like with me, they made up a fake crime to shut
right.
me up, and they all played a part in it. The judge, the district attorney, the law enforcement people, and the DCS attorney that was involved in it. They all knew it was a fake crime, and they all pursued it anyway. And it took me, I mean, I didn't get it overturned until 2024, and it
Mm.
started in 2018. So it took 6 years to even get that
Ah,
crime overturned and dismissed. And it stole my career. It stole my entire career.
right. It just ruins everybody's life when you make a false accusation on someone. And I just would never, ever do that to someone. But apparently,
Right.
there are people that just have no problem making phone
Oh,
calls.
yeah. That trust me, after 30 years of practice in law,
Hmm.
it happens all the time. It happens all the time.
Hmm.
And I'll say, the court system is so broken. It's really not oh, I know people are not going to like this, but it's really not a profession of honor when you have that much twisted stuff going on, right? It's
Hmm.
like when that somebody's making up lies and they're getting away with it, and even when they're pointed out, there's favoritism. And I mean, it's really not. There's so much secrecy. When I started being an activist in 2008, the very first thing I asked for was video and audio recording of all proceedings, or video or audio recordings of all proceedings, because I heard judges yelling at people.
Hmm.
I heard judges making offhand remarks and then looking down at the court reporter and saying, that's off the record, right? So the
Oh.
court reporter would not put it in the transcript. And then, I mean, you just cannot. I've seen court reporter transcripts manipulated. I've seen
Hmm.
court reported transcripts that are inaudible, 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 inaudible over and over and over. And that was 2008 when I asked for that. And even though every court had security cameras already installed, already all over the state of Tennessee, they said, oh, no, no, it would be way too expensive to be able to capture those audios and provide them to the litigants.
Why not tamper-proof mics? Why don't they just have those installed?
Well, it's not the mics, it's when court reporters are
Well,
sitting there at their little thingy majig, right? Typing
mhm.
away, and they're not really directly connected to the audio system of the courtroom. It's just
Mm,
what they actually hear, right? And if they
okay.
actually hear something and then the judge tells them something, they're going to do what the judge tells them to do. Yeah, so
Very.
the way to have transparency is to have the video recordings in the courtrooms. And there are some courts that do it. We have now the capacity to put it in every courtroom, and we just need to do it. And you know what? I think they should all be on the internet too. If you have a hearing and you want your hearing on the internet, you should be able to put it out there,
Right.
right? And let people understand and learn what's happening. I know I'm watching, I don't want to get distracted with this, but it's pretty interesting. There was a horrible murder in Tennessee in
Mhm.
2011. It was a young girl named Holly Bobo, and she disappeared. She was kidnapped in a rural place, and her body was found. And she was dead, of course. And so this huge trial in this little bitty town
Mm.
where you've got every redneck in town is a suspect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, but when I'm watching now we're 2025, and they're at the point in the trial where they're doing this part called the IAC, which is ineffective assistance of counsel. So you don't get this in a civil case, but in a criminal case, you have a trial, and then you have a motion for a new hearing, and then you have appeal, and then you have post-conviction relief, and then you have ineffective assistance of counsel. So you have all these opportunities to try to get yourself cleared, right?
Hmm.
And the ineffective assistance of counsel portion of all of this process is what I call the look behind the curtain, right?
Hmm.
Because you get to see in an ineffective assistance of counsel what the attorneys are saying to each other, what the judges are saying to the people, to the attorneys, right?
Hmm.
All of these things that are not even really so much part of the evidence of the trial, but how that trial occurred. And that's where you learn about the evidence that's withheld. That's where you learn about the prosecutor threatening the defense witness.
Hmm.
That's where, in this particular case, the defense attorney said that the judge was watching football on his iPad from the bench while they're having a jury trial. And accidentally, all of a sudden, everybody in the courtroom heard the football game. Like they
Oh,
heard the football game.
yeah.
And the judge is like scrambling around, like
Oh,
doing something. And he's like, I don't know what that was. Right.
oh
And
my gosh.
and then the judge telling a defense counsel, your client just needs to enter a plea and get this over with, or he's going to get killed, he's going to die, he's going to get the death penalty, all before the case is over. The prosecutor putting her hand in a fist and threatening defense counsel in the hallway. I mean, these are all these things you're hearing now, and how the prosecutor coached a witness to testify and changes his story to get somebody convicted. I mean, this is and I'm watching this as an attorney who's practiced for 30 years. I'm watching this and I'm saying, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, all of that and more. Oh, yeah, all of that and more. Right. And so, that's the truth. When you watch this and you see how this is unfolding and how that influenced the trial, the wrong guy was convicted. The wrong guy was totally convicted. They even had the TBI and the FBI and the local law enforcement were all in disagreement as to how they would proceed with the investigation and who they wanted to follow up on as a suspect. Some of them got fired, some of them got forced off the case. I mean, and this is
Hmm.
your law enforcement, your investigative end of it. So,
Hmm.
as what you're doing and as people talk, it's like, okay, this is what's going on, and how did that happen? How did you get to that point? Who was who was hiding the ball, right? Who was not doing discovery? Who was not going through their discovery? Who was paying off experts, right? So,
Hmm.
and that's for sure. And that's the other thing you have to ask, how much are you getting paid to testify today? So, we want
Hmm.
people really to just get geared up to just be, because this is not stopped. Here we are, 2025, it's not stopped. We're not going to be able to crush the entire judicial system,
Hmm.
but we're working on crushing CPS, and we're doing that. We're getting very involved in legislation, but I certainly applaud everybody. Title 4D needs to be gotten rid of. We need to get rid of
Yes.
Title 4D totally, totally. I mean, we survived before Title 4D, so
Right.
we don't need it, right? That's not about child abuse. It's not about parenting. The only reason they created Title 4D was because somebody was whining and crying about too many single moms on welfare, right?
Hmm.
That's how we got Title 4D. And then it exploded into this whole weaponization of the family court system.
Hmm.
And that is a problem. And the fact that people have not recognized that it's a problem, that when you put the price tag on the child's head,
Right.
it's now not about children anymore. It's not about children. They have a price on them. The same thing with CPS, but Title 4D needs to be totally struck down, totally taken off the table.
Hmm.
If people need to contribute to raising children, that should be an evidentiary hearing, right? That should
Hmm.
be like, okay, what's it cost for daycare? What does it cost for extracurricular activities? How can you guys share those activities, right? In
Mhm.
in real numbers and real evidentiary matters. But it's not. It's like, how many days do you see your kid, and here's how much you're going to pay.
Right, right. They count the days and the overnight stays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep,
And
for sure.
with the Title 4E, which is the foster care problem, along with that Title 4D, when these uh, foster parents take a foster child in, they're getting incentives from the state, correct me if I'm wrong, and they're also getting child support from that parent that they took the kid from.
Well, so the child support actually goes to the state. So
Oh, double
so
dipping.
yeah, which is makes it even more absurd, right? More absurd. But the foster parent gets the Title 4E money, but the actual child support goes to the state, and that's part of what they consider their revenue for the child welfare system. That's really sick. It's just really sick.
It is.
Now, I will say that the AFC, the federal agency, the AFC, did put out a memorandum and said that they should minimize any parent's obligation to pay child support while a child is in foster care. But
Mhm.
it's not a rule, it's not a law, it's not anything. All it is just a memorandum from the federal agency that says you should minimize those obligations.
Just terrible. Just terrible. I just think, get rid of CPS and utilize the police and train them better.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't call an agency a service agency and then,
Mhm.
use them as quasi prosecutors, right? You
Right.
can't. So that's not called services. So I totally agree. I think ultimately the agency is going to have to be disassembled and rebuilt so that the prosecution part of it is totally separate from the agency who's supposed to be providing services for families. We do have service agencies like the Department of Aging and Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and all they do is try to connect people to services.
Mhm.
And that's what family services should be. And child abuse and child neglect should be prosecuted, but they should not put the price tag on the child, not the bounty. It's a
Mhm.
bounty on
Mhm.
the child's head to get a conviction or to get a judgment against a parent. They have a bounty on the child. It's so perverted. It is so
Mhm.
perverted, and it's so amazing. I'm always constantly amazed by the fact that the legislators just totally don't get it. They just don't get it.
Right. I know that Leslie Carrington in Massachusetts was working on getting body cams on these CPS caseworkers.
That would be great. And
Right.
I would like to compare some notes with her because did work with somebody else here in Tennessee, and we put together the body cam bill. Okay, we haven't gotten anybody to sponsor it yet, but what you
Mm.
should also know, and what she needs to know, is Senator Marsha Blackburn did put a bill in called Gracie's Act, and if you pull up Gracie's Act now, it didn't go anywhere, and Marsha didn't work her bill very hard. She put it out there, but it is for body cam, and it's really about the federal bill is more about having grants for body cams. It doesn't really, I don't think it really actually required them. But I know in Tennessee, we've got a proposed bill about having body cams on CPS workers as well.
Right. They're just so out of control when they talk to a parent. They're screaming at parents. They are disgusting, in my opinion.
Well, and the other thing that we need to do is really start looking at it from the criminal aspect. So there are certain federal crimes that have to do with taking federal benefits and programs and taking money from them wrongfully. And
Hmm.
it's called 18 USC 666. And under that federal law, it is a federal crime to unlawfully take money from a federal benefit or program that you shouldn't have. And so when you look at it, when they take these children and put them in foster care, if they either take them unnecessarily or if they are take them and what I call hold them hostage so that they can maximize their income from the children, they are really, it is really theft of a federal benefit or program. Now we need to put those cases together, and it requires a little bit of time because people have to be able to sit down, identify the players. We've got to figure out who are we going to charge with this crime. I think it's primarily the caseworkers and their supervisors who are not reunifying with the parents, right?
Mhm.
So the investigators sometimes are lying to take the children in the first place, but then once the investigator gets the child within the CPS agency, then it's turned over to these caseworkers. And then the caseworker has a supervisor. So those are the two people who should be constantly working on getting that reunification plan in place. And they're the ones who are constantly creating roadblocks, putting false information in government records, saying that parents didn't complete things when they did. They're
Mhm.
the ones who are constantly making false statements. So the other question is though, and I've watched some trials on this statute, and sort of the lacking piece here, or the piece that's missing, is the typically the theft of federal benefits and programs are, let's say for instance, an individual who gets a welfare check and
Mhm.
they shouldn't have a welfare check. Then you know exactly who to charge and you know exactly who got that benefit, right?
Right.
So here's this little problem I'm having as I sort through this and how to bring these criminal charges against caseworkers is, although we see exactly what the caseworker is doing, we can't show the link to show that they are benefiting, right?
Mhm.
Because the money's going to the foster parent, not to them. Now I know, and I've had people report to me that caseworkers get kickbacks, right?
Mhm.
That they
Mhm.
might get $100 from the foster parent, $200, that they'll get certain kickbacks. And I do have a limited amount of proof of that. But I think if we could get an investigation open on that and get into some of these
Oh, yeah.
caseworkers' finances, I think we would find that there is some hanky panky going on in their finances. But it's going
Mhm.
to take triggering an investigation to be able to, through the feds can do this thing called FinCEN, where it's a financial subpoena basically to get somebody's financial records without them knowing it. And if they would do that on a few caseworkers, I think they would get some interesting results.
Oh, yeah, I agree. They have to be held accountable,
Hmm.
and you also have this um, Advocates for Families Act.
Yes.
And
Yes. So here's where we are and what we are doing. So the Family Forward Project on Facebook, we started 10 years ago, and we are using it as a forum to collect voices, much like you do with what you're doing, only we're kind of dumping them into this one place so that the people who've been there for a long time, who've been through this, they're very good mentors, actually. They help other people by making comments or making suggestions to them for the new people who are coming in. I'm very proud of those people. We still have some people who get quite cranky and use foul language and, whine,
yeah.
right? But that's kind of part of the whole growth process, part of
Mhm.
the process. We are up to 25,000 people, and I have been going to Washington for over 10 years, 3 and 4 times a year. And I'll tell you, and so many people, especially new people to this field, they're so afraid of talking to legislators and going to Congress and stuff. And I'm very honest with people. I say, when we first started going to Washington, and look, honey, good Lord, I was in my 60s. I mean,
Mhm.
I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I'm just going to go do it. And we would take a few families in and we would sit down and we would talk to legislative aides and senior advisors and stuff in these congressional and Senate offices. And we were totally whiners. I
Uh-huh.
mean, we were such whiners. We just like, oh, we were so bad. We were so bad. And we really like, it was so bad that at the end of a meeting, and we went on forever, we had no control over ourselves or our time. And they would say, what do you want us to do? And we honestly were like, We don't know. It's just bad, right?
Right, right.
And so we struggled with this for years and years. We had hoped that the Adoption and Safe Families Act would not get reauthorized, but it
Mm,
did,
mm,
unfortunately. We did get the Family First Act passed in 2018, which was supposed to be more directed towards preservation, but it isn't working because these agencies are so collectively egotistic and antagonistic to parents. And so we said, well, if we can just get advocates to work with families, advocates, right now we have advocates and peer support people in a lot of different areas. So there's
mhm,
peer support in addiction. Disabled veterans have peer support and advocacy. There's educational advocates. So I just thought if we can get the federal law to require the states to permit advocates, which means they don't have to assign an advocate, they just have to permit an advocate to participate. It's not a court appointment because I know some people have said to me, oh, this is just another layer of the bureaucracy working against the family. I'm like, nope, because with an advocate, the family can say, I don't like you, get out of my case, get out of my life. And we're like, okay, fine. We're not there to be antagonistic to you. So it's not a court appointment, it's by permission. And the purpose of it is to help guide families through the process. For instance, some of the things we've talked about today, I do some trainings just on general stuff like discovery and experts and evidence, and so that people can be a little bit better trained when they go into it and try to help calm their fears. And then if we need to get relative placement in order, we can start, kind of spearheading that, make sure that happens. So it is called the Advocates for Families Act. It
mhm,
is H.R. 5647. If anybody wants to look it up, you can just Google it and find it. And we are on a sprint, not a marathon. We had it introduced last year, but Congress runs in 2-year sessions.
mhm.
So if you don't get it passed in that 2-year session, you have to start over. So
Ah,
we're in the start over phase, which is this year, 2025 and 2026. So we have several trips planned to Washington. Anybody who wants to help, I would love your help. And what does help look like? Help can look like making phone calls, making emails. It can look like going to Washington if you want to really step it up to that level.
mhm,
But we need, and then learning how to be an advocate. So we can start telling stories and showing how advocacy works. And I have a little team in Tennessee where we do that already, where we get phone calls. I get phone calls all the time, and I will sometimes just show up in court, and I'm just there in court. Now, some people call me toxic, some people call me the gladiator. Either way you look at it, I just show up in the courtroom and they know, oh my gosh, Connie's talking to these people. But
mhm.
we've been on meetings with DCS where, we help guide the parents through those meetings, etc. So I think it's going to be amazing. And the other thing is for us to collect the proper data that we need because
Mhm.
we need better data. So, yes, I would love anybody to help support it. And so the Family Forward Project is on Facebook. It's a group, and there are Family Forward for multiple states, which are part of us, but I can't really keep up on all the states. So the Family Forward Project is where you find most of my comments, my live streams, etc. And then contacting me through Facebook Messenger is probably about the best until I can get some general information from you. And then we can step up, to doing maybe some email communication or document review or something of that nature.
Yeah, I think that's great. I know parents, I won't keep you all afternoon because you and I can talk all day, but I know parents are complaining that, these bills get passed and then they get still pushed by the wayside and nothing's enforced and nothing's happening and
Well,
people,
and I'm glad you said that because when we go to Washington and we've had where we've taken parents to be able to get their parent and we try to organize our meetings so we stay less than 30 minutes but we always have at least a couple stories and then I do a presentation and then we have somebody else who works with us do a presentation and I have a little uh, demonstration that I do now. And while we're talking to these legislative aides, I take a ink pen and I take my pen and I put it on the coffee table or the table in front of us, the conference table, and I roll it back and forth in my fingers. And they start watching the pen. And I says, I'm going to tell you what happens to most of your laws that you pass up here in Congress. And then I flip it off the table. And I say they land right on the floor. I said, if you don't have people out there working it, if
Hmm.
you don't have people out there doing it, nothing's going to happen. And that's the story behind the Families First Act. Now, all these people in Congress that we talked to, they all know it's a problem. They worked super, super hard last year. I got to give them credit.
Hmm.
Title 4B was up for reauthorization, and they did reauthorize Title 4B, and it got signed, I think, January the 3rd or 4th of this year.
Hmm.
So Title 4B, though, you need to know, is only 1/10 of the money under Title 4E. So it's just a little tiny bit amount of money. And it is block grants, and they are specifically oriented to certain programs. So for instance, there's a certain block grant amount of money for supporting legal representation for parents, which is a great idea. But if somebody's not out there making that happen, it's not going to happen,
Hmm.
right? We have a few states, such as I know in New York, they have what's called the Bronx Defenders. They do a great job, and they're smart enough and they watch these things enough to go do a grant to get more money for the Bronx Defenders to operate. But you have places like Tennessee where all of these court appointed attorneys are not working collectively at all. They're working individually out of the trunk of their car because they don't have enough, they're not making enough money to have an office. So they're working individually. They barely make their CLEs, which is their training classes. They barely even keep up with those, much less talk to each other,
Yeah.
right, about how to get extra funding.
Hmm.
And so those type of block grant things are not working. They're just not working. They have another block, another thing under Title 4B for pregnant moms, pregnant mothers with substance abuse, which is, again, it's a great idea. It's something I am very, very concerned about because
Hmm.
these young moms lose their babies, right? And it can be smoking marijuana or it can be meth use, right? They don't even care. But I'm very concerned about that. And there's some grants for that. But that grant does not help CPS, right?
Right.
That grant helps the parents. So CPS is not going to go voluntarily create a grant program that uses that segment of Title 4B money. So it's the
Hmm.
practicality of who is the instrumentality of putting together and using that grant.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly. It's like chasing tail.
Yeah.
It's
But
like,
it's not even that. It's like
it's
most of the people don't even know what to chase, right?
right.
They don't even know it. They don't even know it. I mean, it's shocking how, and I worked CPS cases for several years before I really got it, before I really understood it. And
Hmm.
I was educated by, there's a professor out of Michigan. She's now retired, but she's brilliant. She's very amazing. And she wrote the very first book on the forensic interviews of children, Dr. Kathleen Fowler. And I happened to have her on a case where my client hired her as an expert on some interview, going through some interviews and looking at some child forensic interviews. And she was the one, and that's only like, oh, maybe 13 years ago, I guess. She's the one who educated me. And all she did was just say, look, it's Title 4E money is unlimited and Title 4B is limited. That's basically all she had to do to get me on a search to really start uncovering all of this.
Hmm.
But it's amazing how many attorneys, legislators, judges do not understand that financial incentive to remove children. Some of them are starting to a little bit, but they still, they want the money. So now they just support that, right? They support whatever direction gets them more money.
Hmm. Hmm. And I saw that you were in the film Never in America, directed
Oh,
by
yes, thank
Ryan
you.
Matta. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, somebody sent me. Ryan Matta's documentary, which he did an amazing job.
Oh,
And
yes.
he took, I have done several news shows. I have a great reporter here in Tennessee I work with who's a very compassionate person. And I sort of help him put the stories together with Dennis Ferry with Fox 17. I have some of them up on my YouTube. And he pulled a couple clips from one of my broadcasts where I just say it's a prosecutorial agency. It's not a service agency at all. So I'm
Mhm.
very happy he did that. And the second half of that, where he gets individually into that case, I want to call it the Baby Lucy case. It's not Baby Lucy because that was my case. What's the
Cyrus?
name? Cyrus, Baby
Yeah.
Cyrus. Yep. The Baby Cyrus family. I watched that happen in real time. I
Mm.
mean, it was real time that I saw that mama in the gas station and they had her in the back of that ambulance. And it's very similar with also Syesha Mercado in Florida, she won one of those national talent shows. Not America's Got Talent, but what's the other one? Whatever the other one is.
Um,
Anyway,
I can't think.
yeah, she was stopped alongside of the road and they took her baby and the dad who was driving went on live streaming in real time and we watched in real time them taking her child. And her at that time I was still much braver and her attorney showed up and he was on the other side of the street. I'm like, dang, that guy needs to be a little bit braver. He needs to get over there and start talking to those people. He was scared of them too. He wouldn't even come across the street. He was so scared of them.
Oh.
So, more people are turning their phones on. We live in an amazing time. We've got all kinds of systems to help us, right? We
Mhm.
have our phones. We can record. I say record everything, document everything. I'm old fashioned. I make a lot of handwritten notes. I advise everybody to go to the dollar store and get a spiral notebook.
Mhm.
And every day that something happens, just carry that. Every day, just carry that spiral notebook. I actually had to, thank you for sharing that with me. I now have to have four spiral notebooks because I have to put them topic specific.
Right, right.
I have to have one for my DCS cases, one for our bill and the hard work we're doing on our bill because I was just filling them up too fast. But I say everybody needs a spiral notebook. Make sure you ask everybody's name that you have. If you're on a phone call with CPS, you
Mhm.
go around, you get their name. If they say it too fast, ask them to slow down, ask them to spell it.
Yes.
Okay. So that you have, because when I talk to people, I'm like, who was at that meeting? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, that's not acceptable. You
Mhm.
have to
Oh.
know everything about this. You have to
Mhm.
know everything. Don't trust anybody. And you have to ask, like your CPS investigator or your CPS worker, you have to ask that question, who's your supervisor?
Mhm.
Right? Get the name of their supervisor immediately, all of their titles. What is your title? Because CPS is a master of titles, right?
Mhm.
They are a master of titles, and it's a secret code because you don't know what those titles do. Network developer is the most recent one I heard. I'm like, what in the world is a network developer? And then we ask a question at a family team meeting, and they're like, we can't answer that question. That would have to come from network development. I'm like, why aren't they here then? They're like, well, they weren't invited. Why? Right?
Mhm.
So they're a master of titles, and you have to know every single person,
Oh.
their email, their name, what their title is, who their supervisor is. And if you're in court and you have your little notebook, what
Mhm.
happened that day? What was it about? What are your feelings about it? Right? Like, did it go well? Did you feel like you weren't heard? What did you want to say? If you would have been able to talk, what would you have wanted to say? And so many people will not do that. And it is so critical. And
Right.
it's the same with divorce court and family court as well. The very same thing. I mean, I always had my clients, when I was sitting in court, I would shove them a pad. If they didn't bring a pad of paper, I would shove a pad of paper and a pen in front of them. And I says, you need to be taking notes. about what you think is a lie, what you want to say,
Mhm.
and the good ones, we had some amazing results because they would catch things that I wasn't able to catch. So, being prepared, being engaged, just looking at it as, like I said, a walk through a whorehouse.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to expect. The next time you walk around the corner, you're going to, by the time you get through, once you get through the horror house, you have to go through a house of mirrors
Right.
because because once the absolute horror settles in your bones, then you go through the house of mirrors where it's like the Matrix. You don't know what's going on. So I
Yeah.
really want people to do that. I am doing some trainings just for people to get some basic help on understanding evidence, things like that. I'm going to keep doing them, keep engaging people
Mhm.
at that level. And again, I appreciate you and the opportunity to speak with you and share with you. And you've done amazing. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Oh, I thank you, and I totally appreciate you. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavels, a podcast, help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Connie Reguli. I've learned so much. Thank you so very much for everything that you do.
Thank you.